and welcome back to the 101 podcast by Serena Organics, a platform where we share accurate and reliable information on cannabidiol, also known as CBD. We invite industry leaders in to speak with us, and I'm very excited to introduce our guest today. His name is Robert Jappi. Robert actually headed up the first UK cannabis department just over 2 years ago in the UK, and he now works for a company called INTS, where he is head of UK cannabis law and regulation for both UK and Europe. Robert, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me. It's good to be here.
Thank you for coming. How you doing?
I'm good. It's nice to be out and about.
It's good to actually see some other unfamiliar faces, shall we say? Because obviously lockdown's been an interesting time.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, Robert, we'll jump straight into it. It'll be good to our listeners to understand a bit about how you got into the cannabis law and regulation space, if you don't mind sharing that.
Yeah, so my background is actually criminal defence. So I was a criminal defence lawyer for about 12 years. About halfway through, I decided to go and study a master's degree, but I was studying it part-time. And during the day I was working for a charity called Release, and Release is a drugs and human rights charity based in Shoreditch. And it's a really good organisation, and they campaign for the decriminalisation of drug possession. They think drug use should be a public health issue rather than a criminal justice issue. So I was on their legal team. I was doing a lot of policy and lobbying work, but I was also writing a lot of articles because at the time there was sort of legalisation rolling out across the US. And it was a really interesting time, and it was just looking at what was happening in the US. Something just made me think, one day this is going to come to Europe, and it's going to be big. If you think about it, US and Canada combined population is 350 million odd people. Europe, not just the EU, but Europe is 600, 700 million people. So you can imagine if they have a big cannabis market in North America, it's going to be even bigger here in Europe. I was also actually born on 420, so my birthday is on 420. Yeah,
Nice.
So I always had a little bit of a connection that way. And what happened is this idea of setting up a cannabis law department, it just wouldn't stop nagging at me. So when I joined my previous firm to head up their crime and regulatory team, I just kept thinking about, who's going to be the first to do this? Someone has to be first, and I couldn't see anyone else in the legal market looking at it in a big way. So I pitched the idea to the partners. A bit of a strange response, but they were like, "Okay, go for it." And our timing was really good. So we set up the department in about May 2018. Mm-hmm. At the time, there was a small CBD industry in the UK, but it was growing very quickly. And we were welcomed with open arms. They were crying out for guidance. They'd been trying to navigate this complicated regulatory regime without any help. So immediately we just were inundated with work from the CBD sector. 6 months later, in November 2018, the UK government suddenly legalised medicinal cannabis, much to everyone's surprise. So you can imagine it just snowballed from there. So from about December 2018, all I was doing was regulatory advice for CBD companies and medicinal cannabis companies. My current firm, INTS, came along and they said, "Look, we've seen what you've done. You've built up an amazing practice in a short space of time. We think that the cannabis industry is really progressive. It's sustainable. It's here to stay. It's something we want to be involved in. So come and do exactly what you've been doing, just on the bigger stage with the bigger name and the big reputation behind you." And it was an offer I couldn't turn down. So that's how I found myself where I am. And there are some really good lawyers in the UK that are doing great work in the cannabis sector. I'm probably maybe the only one who is fully dedicated to the industry at the moment. The only lawyer that's just doing cannabis regulatory work. So,
wow.
So I'm very lucky.
Very niche.
I'm really lucky. Yeah. Yeah. Well, this is a funny thing. If you tell people, I'm a cannabis lawyer, they say, "Oh, that is very niche." As you learn more about the industry, you start to realise cannabis isn't niche. It's wide. It's so wide. It covers so many different things. You've got cultivation, licensing, agriculture, manufacturing, food standards, pharmaceuticals, vape products, medical devices. It's actually the industry covers so many different areas of law that I've sort of had to become very familiar with a lot of different things very quickly. So yes, it is niche in terms of its place in the sort of global market at the moment, but when you start to sort of think about the number of different aspects to the industry, then you start to realise it's actually big.
It's very good timing in your part in terms of getting into the cannabis law aspects of it, because it's a massively growing market, as people are probably aware. And I think being one of the first feet in the door and really understanding what's going on in the market, you can sort of help shape the regulations moving forward, because obviously it is slightly unregulated, if we could say. At the moment there's still a lot to be done, so there's going to be quite a lot of work on your hands, should we say, moving forward in terms of shaping the industry and getting the right regulations in place.
Yeah, I mean, as a regulatory lawyer, this type of nascent industry is a dream come true, because there is only going to be more regulations, and each time new regulations are introduced, companies will need advice on how to be compliant and how to stay the right side of the law and that sort of thing. So it's great for me. It's fortunate. It's an industry I'm passionate about as well. So if you're able to build a career in something that you're passionate about, then you won't work a day in your life. You know what I mean? So so I'm very lucky in that respect. There's quite a lot of, you have to be quite brave and courageous as well, because the lack of regulations creates a lot of grey areas.
Yes,
so
indeed.
Lawyers are sort of naturally cautious, and any sort of grey area we would normally shy away from. But there's no point in this industry just telling your clients no, you can't do that, because it's not going to work for them from a business perspective. So the approach becomes more about managing and mitigating risk. There is risk associated to the industry because it is so new. Rather than telling clients, yes, you can do that, and no, you can't do that, it's more about what's your risk profile. So if you operate in this way, you are in a high risk situation. But if here are the steps I would advise you to take, and you can lower your risk profile to a commercially acceptable level. So it's not just been a case of finding a new industry and applying myself to it. It's also been, right, how do we approach this industry in a way that's supportive to business and helps these companies grow and move on in the sector.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And what was the main reason you got into cannabis law in the first instance? Having been spearheaded the first UK department, as it were.
Yeah. Look. So obviously, I tell you what. I mean, like I said, I was a criminal lawyer, and the criminal law market is saturated. There's loads of great lawyers out there doing lots of amazing work. And I was doing perfectly well, and had lots of cases and was doing fine. But you want something more, and it was a case of, here's an industry I think that is going to grow. So I've been looking at some other niche areas. I was doing a bit of sort of regulatory work in the crypto space.
Okay, yeah. Bitcoin, I imagine, was...
of course. And we were getting quite a lot of regulatory work in that space as well. People trying to stay compliant and looking at which jurisdictions were best to set up crypto businesses and that sort of thing. Whilst I think the underlying technology, blockchain technology, is sustainable and is here to stay and has a range of applications, in general, I felt the cannabis industry is the real deal. It's still very small, and it's only going to get bigger and bigger and bigger, and it's here to stay. So from that perspective, from a purely business and commercial perspective, that's what made me decide just to focus on cannabis and leave everything else to the side.
And I think that makes sense as well. I think, having looked at the state of the US and Canada and how quickly they've developed and how big of an industry it is over there, and how it's beginning to build across Europe and the UK, I think it was a very opportunistic move, and you could see there was a lot of development for it to grow over here as well.
Yeah, and part of the reason why I chose to join INTS is because of where they have their global presence. So INTS doesn't have any offices in North America. We only cover Europe, Asia and the Middle East. So Europe is barely just even started. It's not even anywhere close to saturation for the cannabis market. But you can imagine when it moves on to Asia, where you have billions of people and you have a long history and heritage of hemp cultivation in places like India and China. Once cannabis and CBD starts to become legal and regulated in Asia, then things are going to get even bigger. And I think it's already starting. I know Thailand has quite well developed medicinal cannabis regime now, and apparently it's been very popular and worked very well, and the pickup in the last 12 months has been very good. So you're already starting to see people saying, "Forget Europe, let's go and look at Asia because this is even going to be an even bigger market."
Huge market. Yeah. It's interesting because obviously so many companies moving into the industry now. I think when I first started in the industry over a year ago, the quality of products in the market were a bit of a problem on shelves, where people were claiming to have X amount of CBD percentage. They'll get tested, there'll be 0% CBD, and probably a lot of that was down to the lack of regulations. How's that changed over the last, say, 12 months, should we say?
Yeah, regulation. More regulation is only a good thing because it brings consumer confidence, which creates market stability. This is what we want. We want this industry to be sustainable. We want consumers to be receiving high quality products. Previously, when it was very unregulated, you had a lot of people who were happy just to get in, make a quick buck, and get out, and they don't really care about the consumer. And you know, that's detrimental to everybody else in the industry that wants to do things in the right way. So the introduction of particularly, I think we're going to talk about this, but the novel food regime has helped things. Organisations like the CMC, you know, the Centre for Medicinal Cannabis, they did a big study last year. They took 30 well-known CBD brands, tested them all, and you know the results were fairly appalling. I think, you know, some of these brands didn't have any CBD in them at all, like you said. So once you start to focus on consumer protection, then the only way the industry can move forward is by raising standards and giving people a regulatory framework to operate within, so that they know that they are compliant and consumers know that they are receiving what they're paying for. Yeah.
Is there any way? Obviously, it's a growing market in terms of the number of companies coming in. What there is a slight fear at the moment, or what I'm hearing, is that there could potentially become a monopoly with the bigger companies who run the sort of end-to-end process, should we say, from cultivation to extraction to manufacturing to actually then creating a product. Is there any regulations in place that are going to help prevent that for the smaller companies that are in play?
I think this is something I've seen over the last 18 months or so. There aren't many organisations out there that are speaking up for the SMEs. Yeah, a lot of the big organisations, the lobbying organisations, they are focusing on the big boys, the big players within the market, and the SMEs sort of get pushed out to the side a little bit, which isn't good. But there are some really good organisations that will, you know, stand up for the little guy, and one of them is the European Industrial Hemp Association. I think they are trying to promote a really good sort of inclusive approach to the sector, so that it isn't just dominated by the big LPs, the big licensed producers. So look, you've got to get that balance right. Commercialism and capitalism, as the industry becomes bigger, you know, it's a factor. It will happen. You know, there will be big operators that will have a lot of power and influence, but you've got to work really hard to remember the sort of grassroots of this industry and where these products come from, because they're doing people a lot of good, and you want to make sure that all consumers who are taking CBD for whatever reasons all have access to high quality products at a fair price as well. So I think that you know, it is something you're right to highlight. We have to work hard to make sure that the SMEs aren't pushed out of this business. Yeah,
especially the ones that are providing good quality products, which, as you rightly said, do have those benefits for people. And we don't want to overlook that fact. I think a lot of companies came in, as you rightly said, to try and make a quick buck and then get out. But there's a lot of good companies who are focused on actually wellness and improving people's health and actually getting good quality products out there, which people actually fundamentally will benefit from.
Yeah, that's why it's such a nice industry, because you're actually you're helping companies sell products that are actually doing people good.
Exactly.
You know, so there are a lot of smaller companies who are very sort of brand focused and consumer focused, and they will be around for a long time, and they will be more successful because consumers are loyal. If they find a brand that they like and they know they're getting a good quality product, they'll stick with them. You know, that's the way CBD's been marketed. It should be part of your daily routine. You know, you can take it long term. Once you've got a customer and they like your product, they'll stay with you for a very long time. So the smaller companies that have perhaps focused on building their brand and their consumer base, I think they've still got a lot of clout within the market, you know, because of that loyal consumer base.
That's good. You touched on, just diving deep into the novel food application you touched on previously. Could you just give our listeners a bit of more detail around that and what that actually means for companies currently in the CBD space?
So novel food is a set of EU regulations that relate to food safety. The European Commission set a sort of date of May 1997. Any food that has no history of human consumption prior to 1997 is considered a novel product. Okay, and what that means is under EU law, any novel product can only be lawfully sold if you have marketing authorization from the European Commission, from the European food regulators, effectively. Now, there was a whole big argument within the industry as to whether CBD should be considered a novel product. So on one side, the argument was that hemp and hemp extracts have been in the human diet for hundreds, if not thousands of years. So how on earth can these products be novel? You know, people have been consuming hemp globally for a very long time. The flip side to that was, well, you're not marketing a hemp product. You are calling your product a CBD extract, you know, and there is an argument to say, had people called these products hemp extracts with a naturally occurring level of CBD therein, we may never have had this novel food issue. The way that the UK food regulators have explained it is that the hemp plant isn't novel. If you squeeze the juice out of it, so a cold press oil would also not be novel. Once you start putting your product, your extract, through new processes, refinement, or whatever it is you do to it, you are creating a new product,
right? Okay.
A novel product. And that argument has effectively been settled now. February last year, the Food Standards Agency here in the UK said, yes, CBD products are novel. Yes, you need marketing authorization before you can sell them. Interestingly enough, you actually have to get authorization before you can sell them. The FSA have effectively granted an exemption to the CBD industry because there's already so many products available. They realised it wasn't possible to sort of take things off the shelves. Yeah. So what they've done is they've set a date of 31st of March 2021 for CBD companies to be able to assert novel food compliance. The sad thing about this is that making a novel food submission is incredibly expensive, it's time consuming, and it will mean that a lot of smaller operators just won't have the funds or the resources to be able to make a submission. However, it seems that the way the regime is set up, collaboration is being encouraged. So, you know, you're sort of encouraging companies to work together, to share data, to pool resources in order to either make your own submission as a consortium or have your product formulations included in your supplier's submission. So one way or another, even if you don't have your own submission, you may be able to assert novel food compliance come the 31st of March 2021. Anyone trying to sell CBD products who cannot assert novel food compliance at that point will risk intervention from local authority trading standards. They may come to you, seize your products, take your products off the shelves, stop you from selling. So whilst it wasn't how I wanted things to turn out, ultimately I think it will turn out to be a good thing, because at least it gives companies a framework on how to be compliant, a route to compliance, so that we know what we have to do to be compliant. And ultimately, novel foods is about safety. You know, if people are encouraged to take CBD daily, to take it for a long time, we do need to be 100% sure that there's no long-term side effects or ill effects of that nature. And that's the idea behind the novel food safety analysis, is to show that a product is able to be consumed long-term without any issues.
Yeah, because I guess today there's not really been a lot of research going into medicinal cannabis and CBD. Obviously, people are learning still about the benefits, but nothing's set in concrete in terms of, if you take this is exactly what will happen to you. And I think the regulations on that aspect will help sort of define that a bit more.
Yeah, so it's another reason why the sort of medicinal cannabis industry has not progressed in the UK as quickly as we would like it to, because the regulators, NICE, they consider there to be insufficient safety data and efficacy data behind the medicinal cannabis products that are available. So we have to produce that information so that regulators feel comfortable, and that's where something like Project 2021 comes in. You know, there are many organisations out there who are working very hard to create that safety data, that efficacy data, that scientific basis for saying that these products work and are safe. You know, so that's the reason why I say regulations are a good thing, because that will make these industries sustainable in the long term.
And in terms of novel food application, is it every single CBD company that has to apply for one? Is it more the producers of the CBD that have to apply for novel food application?
So look, it's a new regime. We get we get a bit of information from the FSA. A lot of it's up for interpretation at the moment. It hasn't been tested. So the advice I would be giving, obviously, if you're a big licensed producer, if you're manufacturing, you know, bulk quantities of CBD distillate or isolate, then yes, you will absolutely need to have your own submission. If you are white labeling for people, then again, you will probably need to have your own submission, so that you can say to your customers, yes, my products are novel food compliant, so you can buy them from me happily. If you are a brand buying your products in and then repackaging them, if you are getting a company to white label for you, then the likelihood is you should be able to rely on their novel food submission. If I buy their range of products, put them in my own package, the safety analysis will not change for the actual product itself. If I go to a white labelling company and ask them to make specific formulations for me, so private label, then that's a problem, because your formulations will not be covered by their novel food submission, so you would likely have to make a submission in relation to your own formulations. There's a number of ways to do it. As I said, there's two very big consortium applications going on at the moment. So you have the ACI, the Association for Cannabinoid Industries, who are doing a consortium application. And you also have IA, the European Industrial Hemp Association. Again, they are also doing a consortium application. So the idea of a consortium is that, like I said, you work together, you pool resources, you pool funding, and it makes the whole process easier and more affordable for everybody. But it's still expensive. You know, the membership fees for the ACI are very high. IA is trying to raise something like 3.5 million euros, which is a huge amount of money. But the idea is the more companies that join these consortiums, the easier the cost burden is on everybody. I try to give as clear answers as I can, but a lot of this remains to be seen. You know,
yeah, of course.
I think a lot of companies will have to prepare for a bit of a fight with the FSA if they're going to say no, we don't need our own submission. The FSA is going to expect you to justify why that is, and to say why you're still asserting that your products are safe.
Okay.
So what it will do, which is a good thing, it will encourage brands to know more about their supply chain, where their products are coming from, how they're produced, you know, rather than just handing the knowledge of all that over to someone else and then just packaging the products up. You will actually have to engage with your suppliers and have that relationship so that you know that your products are safe and consumers are getting what they ask for.
And I think that's key, actually, because there's so much in the supply chain itself which people may not be aware of when it comes to having the end product, in terms of how the product is grown, the type of strand, how it's extracted,
that's a
how
really
it's
good
packaged.
point. The supply chain, anyone operating in this industry should have a good knowledge of where their products are coming from, even if they're not manufacturing them or extracting them themselves. I think that's really important, to make sure that people understand where you know the path that these products have taken, seed to shelf. That's what they talk about.
Exactly. And given the obviously novel food application coming in March and the ever-changing regulations, how do you see the industry shifting in the next sort of 2 years?
So I think one of the disappointing things about the FSA novel food regime is that they've put a bar on new products coming into the market. So one of the conditions attached to this exemption is that there are no new products to be introduced to the market. If they weren't on the market prior to February 2019, then you shouldn't be putting them on the market now. Effectively, what the FSA have done is, and they've acknowledged this, they're effectively killing innovation in the sector for the next probably couple of years while everyone gets to grips with the novel food regime. nobody really will be able to sort of formulate new products or create any sort of new brands that they can bring to market. Hopefully, once people do get to grips with novel food and people businesses understand how to be compliant, then we will see an increase in innovation and hopefully some new products and new applications of CBD. But for the moment, I think that regime is a case of everyone sort of catching up and getting to grips with everything rather than sort of pushing on and making new and interesting products. So there's good things and bad things about it.
So our listeners who may not know, there's a wide range of CBD products out there at the moment in terms of it's not just your typical old drops. It can be anything from edibles to body balms, body butters, lip balms. I think there's so many different varieties.
Yeah, there's a lot of applications. I think that's why we like CBD, because there's so much more to come. But like I said, whilst the regulations may seem prohibitive at the moment, in the long run I think they will be beneficial for the industry, because what you have is lots of smaller businesses happy to operate in this sector. If the sort of one, eventually the big brands will come in, the Coca-Colas of the world, the Nestle's, they will want to be involved. Without regulatory certainty, they will say, we'll wait until we know what the picture is before entering the market. And that's what's going to push on this industry to the next level. So all of these people who got in a few years ago and they've built up their business and they've got their sort of distribution and their supply chains in, maybe one day soon Coca-Cola will come in and buy them for big money and they can go and live on a beach elsewhere. So that's what we hope will happen.
Well, Robert, thank you for your time today. I know I'll definitely be watching your movements closely to see the latest changes in regulations within the cannabis and CBD space. Just for our listeners who are interested in finding a little bit more about your background and would like to stay in touch, where can they follow you?
I'm quite active on LinkedIn, so I post quite a lot of stuff on there about current cases and changes in regulations. I'm also on Twitter at Rob Jappy. I don't tweet as much as I post on LinkedIn, so that's something I'm trying to change. But yeah, I'm always I speak to a lot of people within the industry, so that's where I get most of my knowledge, is just speaking to as many people in the industry as I can. So I always try and keep everyone up to date on things that are happening and developments.
Perfect. Well, thank you for coming in today.
No worries. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
You're welcome.